Hello, folks. This is the Deal by Me podcast where we ask guests to tell us your story. Your story can be encouraging, inspiring, and very transforming. And if you have a story that you want to share, contact our website, www.dealbyme.com, and we will share your story. People can be inspired by what you have to say. We are very thrilled today to have with us Chris Natzke, who is an eighth degree black belt master instructor and former national taekwondo champion. As a life leadership coach, keynote speaker, and Amazon uh, #1 best-selling author. I want you to know that he transformed lives through his unique brand of black belt leadership. How thrilled I am to have Chris come and share with us today. Chris, it's good to have you.
Oh, great to be here, James.
It's good
Thanks
to
so much
have
for
you.
having me.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, you've kind of already given a little bit of a background. My background is martial arts. I've been studying, this is my 50th year of training in the martial arts. I started as a little kid back in the early 70s and basically now utilize martial arts as a means of inspiring others, not only in the martial art world, but in the world of speaking and coaching. So I have a business called Black Belt Leadership Speaking and Coaching, where I work with one-on-one clients from a coaching perspective, and then I also speak to organizations and corporations to help them have breakthrough results in their businesses.
All right, all right. Chris, I had a chance to kind of look at your background, your bio, I might say, and you started all this stuff at a really young age. Began your martial arts training at the age of 10, and someone says that you was a little short, little chubby kid.
I was.
Yeah. What made you begin martial arts? Was it in the
Yeah,
family? What?
well, thanks for asking. I think it's a pretty unique story, but maybe not that unique to some people that have been doing this a while. But back in the early 70s, there was a television show called Kung Fu with David Carradine, the white chain cane walking as a Shaolin monk walking across the American desert. And at that time, Bruce Lee hadn't really even hit his stride yet. And so I was just, as a little kid, I was just enamored with that show and literally begged my mom to go to my first class. And at that time, it wasn't like it is today where you see a martial arts school almost on every corner. I live in a little small town in Wisconsin, and they just happened to have a program in the community center. And I showed up one day and I was like, oh my gosh, I love what I'm seeing. I felt like I came home, and I've been doing it ever since.
I guess it's so interesting to have somebody who does martial arts to be able to come on a show and kind of talk about how it affects them, how it has transformed their lives, or how it can encourage and inspire somebody else. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that I think I know you can answer, but I think listeners of this podcast would be interested in hearing. Number one, of the lessons that you learned in martial arts, which translate most into everyday life and leadership. And obviously, this is something that was of interest to me, and so I know it'll be of interest to listeners of this podcast, because to be able to talk about how martial arts can help you in everyday life and leadership is very interesting. I like to know the answer to that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for asking that. Yeah. Obviously, I'm a little biased, but I think that martial arts is one of the best things that we can do in our lives, particularly for kids. I've had the honor of training thousands of children throughout my decades of martial art training. But I guess the best way to answer your question is We have within the martial art of Taekwondo, which is what I've been training in all these years, we have what we call the Taekwondo tenets. And these are things that are integrated within the program that we teach. So they're things that were spoken about all the time. They're things that students are encouraged to really live. And these 5 tenets are courtesy, integrity, perseverance, self-control, and indomitable spirit. And one of the first things that you learn in martial arts is this idea of courtesy and respect. And so I think it's important. It's not just how we demonstrate that toward others, although it's very important, but it's also what we demonstrate inside ourselves, right? Because as my mom told me a long time ago, if you don't love yourself, you can't love someone else fully, right? And so you have to have that perspective. And then obviously integrity is not just, again, speaking honestly toward others. It's about being honest with yourself. And then, of course, in its perseverance and indomitable spirit, it's about being able to move through obstacles, continue to show up. Many times in life, James, I think it's not the most talented people, not the people that have the most the best background, they don't have the best education. It's the people that just keep showing up. They're the ones that have success. And then obviously self-control that allows us to be able to look at situations, particularly when we get agitated, and make sure that we're not reacting based on emotion, but we're responding based on being able to calm ourselves down and then take the steps that are necessary to deal with that situation. So I know you asked for 1. I gave you 5, maybe
It's okay.
bonus ones there, but those are the lessons that I learned and that I not only wanted to share with my students, but also when I'm speaking, whether you're a child or you're a president of a corporation, all of those tenets still really mean a lot.
I was kind of smiling a lot when you were talking about that. When I was practicing law, I had a restaurant, and I had a little demonstration show. A martial arts person would come in, and I would always be so amazed how they could just take their hand and break that brick. It was and people always get fascinated. So it must take some kind of conscious persistence or something within to allow you to do those kinds of things. Tell me what it is that can allow your mind to go that far and for your body to take hold of obviously your mind, and when anything is done. And it's obviously good for you, but tell us a little bit about it.
Well, I think it's such a metaphor for life, and so many of the things we teach in martial arts can become a metaphor for life if we choose to. And I think that as a society, this is a general statement, we tend to be pretty distracted, right?
Okay.
We all have those cell phones. We've got computers now. We can look up anything. And that's not to say technology is bad. It's amazing. But if we allow it to overtake us, we're not in the present moment. And one of the things that martial arts teaches us is the ability to be present and to put our one focus exactly where we want it to be. You talk about this whole idea of breaking bricks. One of the things that I do in my work is I have a corporate board breaking experience. So I go into corporations and I actually bring the wooden boards that my black belts break, and I teach people how to do it. And what we're able to do, James, in that hour and a half is, number one, I obviously teach people the proper technique, right? So that's important, and that's important in anything in life. But one of the main tenets we talk about is moving through the target, not just to the target. So let me say that again. We move through the target, not to the target. So think about times in our lives when we're looking at doing something big and we come upon challenges. In fact, I'd argue that the bigger the thing we want to do, the bigger the challenges we're going to face. But do we stop or do we continue to persist through? And, in this board breaking experience, they literally write on the board a breakthrough that they want to have in their lives. But then on the other side, they write the limiting belief or beliefs that have been holding them back. And then when they break that board, they're looking at the limiting beliefs as they're breaking the board. And again, it becomes this amazing metaphor for being able to do that in their lives.
Oh wow! What what a powerful story, Chris. This is it's amazing. When I was reading your bio and just listening and reading what you were saying, I was trying to put it all in perspective. And you talked a lot about pur- purpose, vision, conscious, persistent, and I want you to kind of talk about that just a little bit. What do you mean by having purposeful vision, and what do you mean by having a conscious persistent? Is what are you talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this whole idea, when I was putting together what I call my 7 qualities of black belt leadership, the purposeful vision was number one, because I believe everything that we experience in our life, or anything that we create in our lives, it generally begins with a thought, right?
Mhm.
That chair you and I are sitting in, it started as a thought in somebody's mind. Those headphones you're wearing
Mhm.
it was a thought in somebody's mind. And so many times, what we don't understand is we can be choiceful in creating that vision for what we want in our lives. Rather than letting life come to us, rather we have a vision and then our lives come through us, because they're impacted by our perceptions, by the way that we look at things, by that filter that we put up. And so when we have a purposeful vision, I don't know about your experience in life, James, but for me, when I know what I want and I know why I want it, when I have a
Mhm.
big enough why, that vision is what keeps me going.
Mhm.
And when my why is big enough, why that I want to have this experience in my life, how I want to serve others, how I want to make a positive impact, when those challenges come, it's a lot easier to move through. And
Mhm.
then that brings us to conscious persistence. And the reason I put the word conscious before persistence is many of us are persistent in many things in our lives. We do the same things each and every day. We drive to work the same way. We eat the
Mhm.
same foods. So we're persistent, but we're not conscious about it.
Mhm.
And we end up developing these habits many times that aren't useful to us. They aren't supportive of us. But when we're conscious about where we want to direct our energy, just like breaking through that board,
Mhm.
now we can be choiceful about our lives, and we can live a life that's on purpose, because we are making that choice to walk into it. It doesn't mean that things won't happen to us. It doesn't mean
Mhm.
that sometimes we go off course. But like I learned in 2020, like many of us did during the pandemic, one of my favorite quotes was that we need to be stubborn in our goals, but flexible in our methods.
Mhm.
When we have a vision and we're persistent, then when things aren't going the way we think they need to go, we're also open to adjusting, because we're persistent on moving forward.
Chris, awesome. But uh, I am a uh, minister. As a matter of fact, I'm a retired pastor, just retired past December. 32 years,
Congratulations.
32 years at the same church. And
All right.
so, and when I was about to retire, I wanted to continue with my ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided to start a podcast. And I wanted to ask folks to tell us your story, to share experiences and events in their lives that others could benefit from.
Mm-hmm.
And also to kind of talk about how these same experiences and events in the guest life uh, have benefited them in their daily challenges. You've talked about some of this, but I want to ask you kind of specifically, uh, what would you say to someone who is uh, going through some challenges, someone who is dealing with some issues that they feel is more than what they really can handle? What would you say to them as as someone who is a professional in martial arts? How would you talk to those individuals? Because they'll be listening to this podcast, and they know that I talk about tell us your story, and it's about encouraging, inspiring, and transforming. So tell us a little bit about what you would say to them.
Thank you. And thanks for asking this question, because first of all, I have a story that I'm going to share with you. And I think that first thing I would say to people is, if they're going through challenges, always remember you're not alone. Always remember you're not alone. Whether it's other people that are in your life that can support you, whether it's God, your higher power, spirit, whatever you decide to call it, you're not alone. And I know that sometimes when people hear my bio and they hear what I'm up to, they think, well, this guy's just had it easy his whole life, right? He's never gone through any challenges. But I'm going to share a story with you and your listeners right now that hopefully is going to be able to articulate what I'm saying. When I decided to open up my martial arts school back in 1995, like many new entrepreneurs, I was in the corporate world at that point. It was doing quite well, but I had this dream my whole life to run a martial arts studio. So I had an opportunity to do it. And like I share with audiences, it was not only the most exciting time in my life, it was also the most petrifying time in my life. Because all of a sudden I was going to be moving out of my comfort zone, even though I knew I had skills to teach. I'd never run a business on my own. And what happened, James, I started getting panic attacks. Mr. Tough Karate Guy, right? And so on this one particular day, I was at my current job. We were having a meeting, and I started having a really bad panic attack because I realized that I was going to be leaving soon, but only one person knew. I hadn't even told my boss yet. And so the room started spinning. And I asked if I could be excused. And he, of course, said yes, because I told him I wasn't feeling well. And up until that point, James, I had taken one sick day in 10 years, right? So he knew if I was not feeling well, it was something that was going on. So, but I left there and I immediately drove. Now I'm dating myself a little bit here, but I drove to a gas station. And remember how they used to have the phone booths that you could drive up to? This is before cell phones.
Oh yeah,
So
sure.
I drive up to one of those and I call my minister. I call to ask, I need help. I need to talk to somebody. And the minister I was asking for wasn't there, but the associate minister was. And so I drove 30 minutes to my church, which to this day, James, I have no idea how I got there. But I sat down with our minister, Dr. Marjorie, and started telling what was going on. I'm about to leave this job. I'm going to start this business. I have 2 small kids at home. I'm the sole breadwinner. I don't know if I can make it. Then the next thing I ask is, could I lay down on the floor? And then soon I find myself, James, in the fetal position. And I'm just rolling on the floor. And so I just remember how calm she was. And she walked around her desk and called my wife at the time and said, yes, he's here with me. No, honey, he's not doing very well. So she cleaned me up. And again, I don't know how I got home. And I had a martial art testing that night that I needed to officiate. And I did it with not a problem. But afterwards, I went back into my panic. And my wife at the time took me to the hospital, to the emergency room. And I'm in this full panic attack, and they sedated me. And when I woke up the next morning, what they ended up telling me was, they said, Chris, if you wouldn't have been such a well-conditioned athlete, you most certainly would have gone into cardiac arrest last night. So I know what it's like to be on the edge. I know what it's like to feel like all the walls are closing in around you. But what I would tell people is lean into the things that support you, your faith, the people around you, and don't give up hope, because many times the dreams that we have that are the biggest that we want, that our souls are wanting us to do, they're also the ones that scare us the most. And I was able to get through that time in my life with a lot of support, a lot of love, and my martial arts school became an amazing success. But if I wouldn't have been able to have that support and get through that time when I was literally on my back, if I would have quit, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you today.
That's powerful, Chris. Listeners, don't go in a place because Chris is going to come back and share some more good nuggets with us. But let me ask you, Chris, first. How can listeners get copies of your book, if you have any, learn more about you from the website? Tell us a little bit how they can get in touch with you or find more about you?
Absolutely. Well, they can simply go to my website, which is www.chrisnatzke.com. That's CHRIS, N as in Navy, ATZ as in zebra, KE.com. They can find both my books there, Black Belt Leadership and Breaking Through. And I had shared with you before we came on air, I've got a program coming up on February 17th. Myself and my good friend JB Brayton, we're both professional speakers, and we train people who are looking to become speakers themselves, whether it's professionally or if they just want to use it to build their own business. And so anyway, we're going to have something we call the Champion Speakers Academy. It's a full day virtual workshop on Friday, February 17th. So it's right at the top of my webpage. If they're interested, they can reach out, contact me. I'd love to have a conversation with them.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that with listeners of this podcast. Let me ask you a couple more questions because this is an interesting discussion today. And I'll be honest with you, I'm truly enjoying it. It's just awesome. I didn't expect to get this from martial arts. It's interesting. So what is the biggest obstacle that people or listeners of this podcast may face when attempting to have a breakthrough, in their lives, because we are down sometimes, we're going through something, and we do need a breakthrough. And what are the biggest obstacles to that?
Well, it's going to almost sound like a cliche, James, but
okay,
it's what's going on inside our minds. What we do is we have a tendency to think that everything that's happened in the past is going to continue to move forward. And so what ends up happening is many times we live our lives just on repeat. Since it happened yesterday, it must be happening today. And we get in touch with these limiting beliefs of thinking, since it's the way that it always was, it's the way it's always going to be. And it's not until I think we make that choice where we have the courage to say, I'm going to show up differently. And the other thing that gets in our way is sometimes when we're looking at something, a big breakthrough we want to have, is we look at it in its totality. We say, oh my gosh, it's this big thing that I want to create in my life. But it seems so big that it's intimidating. And what I always tell people is begin with the end in mind, but then break it down. What are the small steps we can take? And if you don't know what those steps are, just make the first right move you think. And then after that, look for the next right move and the next right move, because what that does is it builds momentum. And now pretty soon when momentum is built, we start seeing things that maybe we didn't even see before because we're in motion. I think one of the worst things that can hold us back is when we just sit back and we plan and we plan and we plan and we plan, right? And one of my teachers told me one time, he said, Chris, you need to remember that God meets us at the point of action. We start taking action. That's when all the powers start to converge to help us move forward. But if we're sitting back waiting for it to come to us, probably isn't going to. We need to make sure we're taking the step forward so that the universe knows we're serious and we're on purpose. We're on a mission.
Wow! How amazing this this interview is with you today, Chris. I'm excited. I want you to know that. How can well, let me ask this way: what is the biggest maybe some of the more empowering questions that we can ask ourselves to keep us, listeners who are listening to this podcast are going through something. What can keep them on the road to breakthrough? I was talking to somebody just yesterday who talked about coming that they were dealing with or coming out of a breakup into a breakthrough, and I thought that was really interesting. So kind of talk to us a little bit about that. How can you keep on the road to a breakthrough?
Well, I've got, I think, 4 questions that I think are really powerful. Number one, when we're dealing with challenge, it's very normal for us to be questioning ourselves and asking a question like, why is this happening to me? And why is this, why is this always happening to me? Now, usually when you ask a question beginning with why in that context, it tends not to be an empowering question, right? It's almost a victimized question. So it's not to say when we're going through challenge, we don't feel it. I always tell my clients, if you're upset, feel it, don't suppress it. But then once you get through that, ask yourself this question: what's really happening here? What's really happening here? So what I mean by that is, sometimes we get in stories. Oh, he said this to me. I feel bad. I'm a victim here. No, what's really happening? Well, this element showed up in my life. It's now a challenge in front of me. And then the question is, what can I do about it? Right? So it's easier said than done, but what's really happening? And then sometimes another good question is, what wants to happen here? What wants to happen here? Meaning, okay, I've been down this road and I'm continuing to move ahead and I keep running into obstacles. Where do I need to make an adjustment? Where do I need to step back and evaluate? And like I said, be stubborn in our goal, but flexible in our methods. And then what's the next right move? What's the next right move? And just choose one. Don't think you have to have a plan for 10 right at the beginning. Get yourself in motion. And then once that's revealed to you and you're moving, then what's the next right move after that? And when we build momentum, that's when breakthroughs occur. They usually don't happen in one huge instant. It's like you say, it took me 15 years to become an overnight sensation. It's that consistent effort, and pretty soon, all of a sudden, and sometimes when we least expect it, that's when the breakthrough occurs.
Wow. Well said. Well said. I want to ask you this. If you have one piece of advice to give to listeners of this podcast, one piece, that's all I'm asking of you, Chris, because you were just exciting today for me to interview. So just one piece of advice that you would give to listeners of this podcast, what would it be?
Listen to your heart.
Wow. Listen to your heart. Mm-hmm. Listeners, I don't think it can be any clearer. Listen to your heart. Well, there you have it. Chris Natzke. Chris Natzke. Oh, it's so good to have you with us. Chris Natzke, he was a leadership coach, professional speaker, and Amazon #1 best-selling author. He worked to inspire organizations and individuals to reach higher levels of leadership, teamwork, passion, and breakthrough results by embracing the champion's mindset. What an awesome guy Chris is. Chris, thank you again for sharing with us today.
Thanks, my friend. It was my honor.
Thank you. Thank you so very much.